The first sound you hear is wood splintering. A front door painted sky blue and worn soft from decades of summer sun explodes inward under the force of a steel-toed boot. Behind it stands Mr. Harold Carter, 68 years old, holding nothing but a dish towel and the smell of pot roast. He freezes, hands raised, voice trembling. "Officers, I think there's been a mistake." But there's no pause, no second thought. A baton slams across his ribs so hard the crack echoes through the house. He gasps, staggers into the dining room where the table is set with his late wife's china. The boot comes next, straight to his chest, sending him crashing into glass plates and a week's worth of love poured into a homecoming meal. The man who did it, Officer Randall Briggs, smirks over him. That's what happens when you resist arrest. Now here's the thing, Harold wasn't resisting anything. He was waiting on his grandson Daniel, a Navy veteran who'd been overseas for 8 long months. That dinner was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it turned into blood on the hardwood. By the time Daniel's boots hit American soil, his heart full of the thought of cornbread and Sunday-style laughter, the house on Willow Lane was taped off like a crime scene. The garden trampled, the blue door hanging sideways. And the neighbor, Ms. Louise, an old woman with sharp eyes and shaky hands, whispered to him, "They took your granddad in an ambulance, baby." He was screaming. Inside the hospital, Daniel found Harold hooked up to machines. Tubes in his nose, chest bandaged, face swollen like he'd gone 10 rounds with life itself. And still the old man tried to smile, tried to soften the blow. "Danny, they said I was selling drugs. You know I never—" His voice broke. Daniel gripped his hand. "I know, Granddad, I know." You could see it in Daniel's eyes, something clicked. Overseas, he'd been trained to keep calm under fire. But this wasn't a battlefield in another country. This was his own blood broken in his own home because a man with a badge decided to rewrite the truth. Then Ms. Louise did something that changed everything. She pulled out her phone. "I recorded it," she said, voice shaking, "all of it. From when they kicked in your door to when they dragged you out, every second." Daniel watched it right there in that dim hospital room. Heard his grandfather's soft voice say, "Maybe you've got the wrong house." Saw the baton swing the boot, land the pills planted on the floor. He didn't flinch, just let the fury settle deep like a storm pulling tight before it breaks. When he walked out, he didn't just have anger, he had evidence and a mission. He found a lawyer, a wiry old fighter named Marcus Bell, who'd been taking on police misconduct cases since before Daniel was born. Marcus leaned back in his chair, hands folded, and said, "Son, are you ready for war? Because that's what this is." Daniel answered the only way a man like him could. "I've been at war 8 years. This time it's personal." The first battle came in the form of silence. Internal Affairs stamped a neat little file. Officer Briggs acted appropriately. No wrongdoing. Case closed. But Daniel wasn't about to let paper bury blood. He turned Ms. Louise's shaky cell phone video into a weapon. He pushed it to journalists, to activists, to anyone who'd watch. And watch they did. The internet exploded. Hashtags lit up, hashtag Justice for Harold. Comments poured in from folks across the country who'd lived their own versions of that nightmare. And then Briggs made his mistake. He walked right into Harold's hospital room, smug grin on his face, leaned down and hissed, "Your grandson thinks he's a hero. Heroes end up dead. Tell him to back off." What Briggs didn't know was that Daniel was right there recording every word. He stepped in calm as a shadow eyes locked on the man who'd broken his world. "Officer," he said, "what you just did, that's witness tampering, a felony. And this time I've got you on tape." For the first time, Briggs blinked. The bully smelled his own fear. When that audio leaked, and it hit harder than the video, people heard the threat in his voice, heard the desperation. And protests that had started with a few dozen neighbors swelled into hundreds outside the police station. Old folks, young kids, teachers, veterans, holding signs chanting Harold's name. Briggs couldn't handle it. One night, drunk on his own rage, he stormed out of the precinct in full uniform, gun on his hip, and shoved his way into the crowd. Cameras rolled as he pulled his weapon on unarmed protesters, screaming, "Back off or I'll shoot." For 93 seconds, the whole world held its breath. 93 seconds that sealed his fate. By morning, the feds were at his door. Civil rights charges, conspiracy, racketeering. Turns out Briggs wasn't just violent. He and his buddies had been planting evidence and pocketing forfeiture money for years. Organized crime, plain and simple. The trial that followed wasn't just about Harold. It was about dozens of victims, people too scared to speak until now. They lined up, voices shaking, but steady, telling the same story, stop and beat and framed. And every time Briggs's lawyer tried to twist the truth, the prosecution hit play on the video of Harold's beating. The jury watched stone-faced as a 140-pound granddad with his hands raised was crushed under the weight of a man's ego. And when Harold himself took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. He shuffled forward, leaning on his cane, ribs still sore, voice thin but unbroken. "I raised my hands," he said. "I spoke polite. I just asked them to check their address. If that's resisting, then being decent is a crime." Then came Daniel. Navy blues pressed metals he never cared to show, glinting under the lights. He faced the jury and spoke not like a soldier, but like a grandson. "My grandfather raised me when I lost my parents. He taught me respect, honesty, strength. What that officer did wasn't just an assault, it was an attack on every value I was raised to defend. I swore an oath to protect this country from enemies foreign and domestic. Turns out sometimes those enemies wear uniforms." The jury didn't take long. Guilty on every count. Briggs sat there, the smirk finally gone, staring at a future measured not in years served on the force, but years served behind bars. And outside the courthouse, Harold stood arm in arm with Daniel, weak but proud. "I never wanted to be the face of reform," he told the crowd. "I just wanted to cook dinner for my grandson. But when a man in power chooses violence over honesty, you either bow down or you fight back." Now here's where I leave it with you. Some folks say Daniel crossed a line using his training to build a case like a military op. Others say that's the only reason justice was served, that without his fight, Harold would have been just another forgotten name. So what do you think? Was Daniel right to push this war all the way to federal court? Or should he have stepped back and let the system handle it, even if that system was broken? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your stories, your experiences, your take on justice. And if you believe no one, not cops, not soldiers, not anyone should ever be above the law, then hit that like button, subscribe, and help make sure stories like Harold's are never silenced again. The first sound you hear is wood splintering. A front door painted sky blue and worn soft from decades of summer sun explodes inward under the force of a steel-toed boot. Behind it stands Mr. Harold Carter, 68 years old, holding nothing but a dish towel and the smell of pot roast. He freezes, hands raised, voice trembling. "Officers, I think there's been a mistake." But there's no pause, no second thought. A baton slams across his ribs so hard the crack echoes through the house. He gasps, staggers into the dining room where the table is set with his late wife's china. The boot comes next, straight to his chest, sending him crashing into glass plates and a week's worth of love poured into a homecoming meal. The man who did it, Officer Randall Briggs,